Detective Nicholas Hester's muscles burned for maintaining his position for the past 4 hours in the abandoned office building. His thermal scope remained fixed on the Obsidian Tower's penthouse suite across the street, where Boston's most notorious crime boss Armando Lowe conducted his business. 6 months of meticulous undercover work had led to this moment. The radio silence from his partner, Zachary Espinoza, positioned 2 blocks away, was comforting in its familiarity. They perfected this wordless communication over 8 years of partnership in Boston PD's narcotics division. Nick's mind drifted briefly to their shared history. Zach's best man speech at Nick's wedding had left everyone in tears from laughter, while Nick had kept his shorter but equally memorable at Zach's ceremony 2 years later. Alpha 1, status report. Captain Dwayne Powers' voice crackled through Nick's earpiece, breaking his reminiscence. Maintaining visual on the target location, Nick responded, his voice barely above a whisper. 2 security guards on the south entrance, 1 at the service elevator. Copy that. Powers' tone carried its usual authority. Beta team, what's your status? Beta in position, came the response from another unit. Underground parking secure. Nick adjusted his grip on the rifle, his fingers moving with practiced precision over the weapon's familiar contours. The scope's digital display showed perfect atmospheric conditions for the observation. He'd insisted on this position despite Powers' initial objection. Nick's instincts had never failed him in 15 years on the force. Target's vehicle approaching, Powers announced. Everyone maintained positions. This is not, I repeat, not an engagement scenario. We're here to gather intelligence only. Through his scope, Nick watched thermal signatures moving in the penthouse. The guards' patterns were consistent with previous observations, methodical sweeps every 15 minutes. But something was different tonight. 2 figures appeared in the master bedroom, their movements suggesting intimacy rather than business. Captain, we've got movement in the primary suite, Nick reported, keeping his voice professional despite an unsettling feeling in his gut. 2 individuals doesn't match Lowe's usual pattern. Acknowledged, Powers responded. Maintain surveillance. Lowe's car is 3 minutes out. Nick zoomed in, analyzing the figure's movements. The male's posture was commanding, authoritative. The female. Nick's trained eye caught something familiar in her motion patterns. Years of surveillance work had taught him to recognize individuals by their movement signatures. And this one, Jesus Christ, he muttered, his finger tightening involuntarily on the rifle's grip. Say again, Alpha 1. Powers questioned. Nick forced his breathing to remain steady. Negative, Captain. Just adjusting position. He kept watching his professional detachment warring with a growing sense of recognition. The female figure moved with a grace he knew intimately. The same grace he'd watched across their dining room table for the past 5 years. Running facial recognition on the penthouse occupants, the technical support team announced. Negative. Powers cut in quickly. We stick to thermal imaging only. We can't risk any active scanning alerting Lowe's security systems. Nick's jaw clenched. Powers' order went against standard procedure. In his peripheral vision, his phone screen lit up with an incoming message. Years of training kept his position steady while he glanced at the notification. A text from Zach to an unknown number. Meeting at the usual place tomorrow. Last time was incredible. Nick's scope remained unwavering. Even as his mind processed the implications, Tanya had told him she was visiting her sister in Providence for the week. He'd kissed her goodbye this morning, tasting the mint on her breath from her morning coffee. The coffee he'd made her, just like every other morning. Alpha 1. Confirm visual on southern approach. Powers' voice came through again. Confirmed, Nick replied, his voice betraying nothing of the storm building inside him. His scope stayed fixed on the bedroom, scene playing out before him, even as his free hand typed a message to an old contact. Joey, remember that favor you owe me. Time to collect. The bedroom door opened, flooding the space with light. Nick watched through his scope as Captain Powers, his commanding officer of 3 years, walked into view. Even without facial recognition, The man's bearing was unmistakable. Nick observed with clinical detachment as Powers removed his tie with practiced ease, moving toward the female figure toward Tanya. "All units maintain radio discipline," Powers ordered, his voice slightly breathless, and Nick's earpiece. "Lowe's vehicle is entering the parking structure." Nick's phone vibrated again. Another message from Zach, but this time to Tanya's number. "The last wild night was amazing. Same time next week." 15 years of police work had honed Nick's self-control to a razor's edge. He kept his breathing steady, his scope perfectly still. Even as his world imploded, the revelation crystallized in his mind with brutal clarity. His wife and his best friend were lovers, and his commanding officer was involved as well. "Alpha 1, do you copy?" Powers' voice held a note of concern. "Copy, Captain," Nick replied, his tone professionally neutral. "I have eyes on the target." Through his scope, he watched Powers embrace his wife, their silhouettes merging in the thermal image. Nick's trigger finger remained steady. Years of training, preventing the instinctive response his rage demanded. The operation had to come first. The case they'd built against Lowe was too important for personal vendettas. But in that moment, as he watched the betrayal unfold through his scope, something fundamental shifted in Nicholas Hester's worldview. The righteous detective who believed in the system died silently in that abandoned office, replaced by something colder, more calculating. Movement in the lobby. Zach's voice came through the radio, professional and unaware that his betrayal had been discovered. "Lowe's arriving." "Copy that," Nick responded, his voice mechanical, devoid of the friendship that had colored their communications for 8 years. He maintained his surveillance position, watching as Powers and Tanya moved away from the window. His phone showed another message from Joey. "Whatever you need, brother. You there for me in Jersey. I'm there for you now." Nick allowed himself a small, cold smile. The operation against Lowe would proceed as planned. But afterward, there would be a reckoning. Trust, once broken, could never be repaired. And betrayal, in Nicholas Hester's world, demanded payment in full. The thermal imaging painted a grotesque tableau in shades of red and orange. But Nick didn't need enhanced optics to recognize his wife's movements. 5 years of marriage had burned every gesture, every graceful turn into his memory. Tanya's characteristic way of tucking her hair behind her ear, the slight tilt of her head when she was listening. All visible, even through the scope's digital display. "Alpha 1. Status update." Powers' voice came through the earpiece, carrying no hint of the intimacy Nick had just witnessed. "Maintaining surveillance, Captain," Nick replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. No change in security patterns. The lie came easily, professionally. Nick's mind raced through the past months, reconstructing events with new context. Tanya's late nights at the marketing firm, her weekend trips to visit her sister, the sudden change in her perfume 2 months ago. All carefully crafted deceptions. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Zach to Tanya. "Powers is getting suspicious. We need to be more careful." Nick allowed himself a bitter smile. Powers wasn't the one they should have worried about. He switched to a private channel on his radio, contacting the surveillance team. "Charlie team, I need all surveillance footage from the Renaissance Hotel, past 3 months. Official request coming through channels tomorrow." "Copy that." Detective Hester came the response. "Any specific dates?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday, the days Tanya had her supposed yoga classes." Through his scope, Nick watched as Powers and Tanya moved through the bedroom. Their familiarity with each other spoke of a long-standing arrangement. Powers' hand on the small of her back, Tanya's comfortable lean into his embrace. These weren't the awkward movements of a new affair. "Target vehicle approaching underground parking," Zach's voice reported for occupants visible. "Copy that." Beta Team Powers responded, his voice completely professional now. "All units maintain positions. This is strictly surveillance tonight." Nick's phone lit up with another message, this time from Joey. "Got some interesting info about your captain's recent activities. Want to meet?" "Tomorrow. Usual place." Nick typed back, his movements precise despite the rage coursing through him. Through the scope, Nick observed his powers quickly dressed. His movements hurried now that Lowe's arrival was imminent. Tanya remained by the window, and for a moment, Nick could swear she was looking directly at his position. Impossible through the thermal imaging and the distance, but the thought sent a chill through him. Charlie team, I need everything you have on Captain Power's movements for the past 6 months. Nick requested through the secure channel. That's above our clearance, detective, came the hesitant response. It's related to an ongoing internal affairs investigation. Nick lied smoothly. Authorization code Alpha 79 Delta. A pause, then understood. Detective data will be ready tomorrow. Nick's scope followed Powers as he left the bedroom, watching as his commanding officer straightened his tie and resumed his professional demeanor. Tanya remained in the bedroom, her thermal signature showing her seated on the edge of the bed. All units be advised, Powers' voice came through the main channel. Lowe is entering the building. Maintain radio silence, unless absolutely necessary. Nick's finger caressed the trigger of his rifle, a phantom pressure that would have been so easy to convert into action. One shot, clean, professional, untraceable in the chaos that would follow Lowe's arrival. But that would be too quick, too merciful. His phone vibrated with a message from Tanya, working late tonight. Honey, don't wait up. Nick typed back his response, maintaining their charade. Stay safe. Love you. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Through his scope, he watched as Tanya finally left the bedroom. Her movements unhurried, confident. She had no idea her carefully constructed world of lies was about to collapse. Nick's mind was already formulating plans, considering angles, identifying pressure points. Alpha 1, I'm seeing movement on the west side, Zach reported. Possible second vehicle approaching, confirmed. Nick responded, his voice giving no indication that he was watching his wife exit the building where she just betrayed him. Second vehicle, 3 occupants. His phone lit up with another message from Joey. Got some interesting dirt on your partner too. Seems he's been making some questionable investments lately. Send everything, Nick replied. The pieces were falling into place. Powers, Zach, Tanya. Each of them had secrets, vulnerabilities, weak points that could be exploited. Nick had spent 15 years learning how to dismantle criminal organizations. Now he would use those same skills to destroy the people who had betrayed him. All units, maintain current positions, Powers ordered. This is a long-term surveillance operation. We're building a case, not making arrests. Understood. Captain, Nick responded, adding just the right note of respect to his voice. Alpha 1, maintaining position. Through his scope, he watched as Tanya's car pulled out of the underground parking. His wife of 5 years, driving away from her lover's embrace, unknowingly setting in motion events that would destroy everything she held dear. Nick's phone buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number. Detective Hester. This is Stanley Key from Internal Affairs. We need to talk. A cold smile crossed Nick's face. Even better, Internal Affairs was already involved. They just didn't know it yet. The operation against Lowe continued with mechanical precision, each unit maintaining their positions as the crime boss conducted his business in the penthouse. Nick's thermal scope tracked movements through the building. His reports precise and professional. Nothing in his voice betrayed the calculated fury building inside him. Alpha 1, what's your visual on the west entrance? Powers asked through the radio. 2 of Lowe's men posted standard rotation. Nick reported no civilian traffic. His phone screen lit up with another message from Detective Key. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring everything you have. Nick's mind worked through scenarios, calculating angles and possibilities. Stanley Key's reputation in internal affairs was legendary. The old detective had brought down corrupt officers at every level of the department. He would make a useful ally or a dangerous enemy. Beta team reporting movement in the underground parking. Zach's voice came through the radio. Looks like Lowe's preparing to move. Copy that. Powers responded. All units maintain surveillance. No engagement. Nick's scope shifted to track low security detail as they emerged from the building. His finger rested near the trigger. Not on it. Years of training preventing even that small tell of his internal state. Through the thermal imaging, he could see Tanya's car still in the distant parking lot, waiting. His phone vibrated again. A message from Joey. Got the hotel security footage you wanted. You're not going to like what's on it. Send it. Nick typed back, his movements precise despite the tremor of rage in his hands. Alpha 1. Confirm visual on the primary target. Powers ordered. Confirmed. Nick responded, watching as Lowe's distinctive figure emerged from the building. Target is moving to his vehicle. Form and security detail. Through his scope, Nick observed the choreographed movements of Lowe's security team. Professional. Well-trained. Just like he'd been before discovering the depth of betrayal surrounding him. His phone buzzed continuously now. Messages flooding in from Joey. Footage shows Powers and your wife meeting twice a week for the past 3 months from Zach to Tanya. Need to talk. Things are getting complicated. From Powers to an unknown number. Transfer the funds tonight. No paper trail. From Tanya to Zach. He suspects nothing. But we need to be careful. Each message was a nail in the coffin of Nick's former life. But his scope never wavered. His reports remained precise. The operation had to come first. The case they built against Lowe was too important for personal vendettas. At least that's what the old Nick would have believed. All units be advised. Powers' voice came through. Target is mobile. Maintain distance. No pursuit tonight. Nick watched through his scope as Lowe's convoy pulled away from the obsidian tower. His mind cataloged details automatically. Vehicle types, plate numbers, security patterns, all useful information for what would come next. Alpha 1, you're cleared to break position. Powers announced. Good work tonight, everyone. Copy that. Nick responded, his voice neutral. Alpha 1 signing off. He maintained his position for another 30 minutes, watching as the various players in tonight's drama dispersed. Powers' care leaving first, followed by Tanya's 10 minutes later. Professional tradecraft. Never leaving together. Maintaining plausible deniability. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Detective Key. Whatever you're planning, make sure the evidence is solid. These kinds of cases can get messy. Nick smiled coldly as he packed up his surveillance equipment. He had no idea how messy things were about to get. His mind was already formulating plans, identifying pressure points, calculating angles of attack. The old Nick Hester, the dedicated detective, the loving husband, the loyal partner, died in that abandoned office building. In his place emerged something colder, more calculating. A man who understood that true justice doesn't always wear a badge. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through the accumulated evidence of betrayal. One final message caught his eye. Zach to Tanya. What we're doing. It's not right. But I can't stop thinking about you. Nick's thumb hovered over the delete button for a moment before saving the message. Every piece of evidence would serve its purpose in the coming days. Every betrayal would be repaid in full. As he left his surveillance post, Nick pulled out a burner phone, one of several he'd maintained for deep cover operations. He dialed a number from memory. Joey? Yeah, it's me. That favor you owe me. Time to collect. I need everything you can get me on Captain Dwayne Powers, Detective Zachary Espinoza, and the Obsidian Tower security systems. Everything. He listened to Joey's response, a cold smile playing across his features. No, this isn't about the Lowe case anymore. This is personal. And Joey? When this is done, a lot of people are going to get hurt. Make sure you're not one of them. He ended the call, stepping out into the night. Behind him, the Obsidian Tower stood as a monument to corruption and betrayal. Nick's face remained impassive, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator assessing its prey. His burner phone buzzed again. Another message from Joey got something interesting on Powers' financials. Multiple offshore accounts, Regular transfers. Want the details. Everything. Nick typed back. And Joey? I need access to the tower's security locks. All of them. That's risky territory, brother. Joey replied quickly. Security's tight after that breach last month. Nick's fingers moved swiftly across the keypad. Name your price. The response came seconds later. For you, no charge. But Nick, whatever you're planning, be careful. Powers has friends in high places. A cold smile touched Nick's lips as he pocketed the phone. Powers might have friends in high places, but Nick had spent 15 years building his own network. Confidential informants, former suspects who owed him favors, criminals who respected the detective who treated them fairly. Now those connections would serve a different purpose. His personal phone vibrated. A message from Tanya, missing you. Can't wait to be home tomorrow. Nick stared at the message, remembering how she'd looked through his scope earlier in Powers' arms. The rage inside him had crystallized into something colder, more focused. His response was measured, maintaining the facade. Drive safe. Love you. Another message popped up, this time from Zach. Tough surveillance tonight. Partner drinks tomorrow. Nick's jaw clenched, but his reply was casual. Can't paperwork from the Wilson case. He walked to his unmarked car, mind already mapping out his next moves. The operation against Lowe would continue. He'd make sure of that. But now it would serve a dual purpose, providing cover for his own investigation. His burner phone buzzed one final time. Detective Key. My office, 10 a.m. sharp. Bring everything you have on Powers. And Hester, watch your back. The captain has eyes everywhere. Nick started his car, his expression unreadable. Let Powers have his eyes. Let him think he was still in control. The game was already in motion, and Nick had learned from the best how to play the long game. He pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the obsidian tower and its secrets. In his mind, he could still see them through the scope. Powers, Tanya, the easy familiarity of their betrayal. Each image fueled the cold fire of his resolve. Tomorrow, he'd begin dismantling their world piece by piece. But tonight, he had preparations to make. After all, revenge, true revenge, required patience, precision, and most importantly, proof. His phone lit up with one last message from Joey. Found something else. Your partner's been making regular trips to a safety deposit box at First National. Want me to look into it? Do it? Nick replied. His decision made. No stone would be left unturned. No secret left unexposed. They'd chosen their path, made their decisions, betrayed their vows. Now they would learn what it meant to cross a man who had nothing left to lose. Nick drove through the darkened streets of Boston, his mind clear, his purpose set. The detective who believed in justice and the system was gone. In his place sat a man who understood that some debts could only be paid in blood and broken promises. Tomorrow, the game would begin in earnest. But tonight, Nicholas Hester would plan his revenge with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made him one of Boston PD's finest. After all, he'd learned from the best how to destroy someone completely. He'd spent years taking down criminal empires. Now he would use those same skills to dismantle the lives of those who had betrayed him. The night stretched ahead, full of possibilities and promises of retribution. Nick allowed himself one final, cold smile. They thought they knew him. The dedicated detective, the trusting husband, the loyal partner. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In the war to come, there would be no rules, no mercy, and most importantly, no survivors. Joey Clark wiped down the bar counter at the Rusty Anchor, his movements precise and practiced. The establishment sat empty at this early hour, perfect for the kind of conversation he was about to have. The bell above the door chimed, and Nick Hester walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Been a while since Jersey, Joey said, placing a glass of whiskey in front of Nick without being asked. Never thought you'd call in that marker. Nick's face remained impassive as he took the seat. Tell me what you found. Joey pulled out a thick manila envelope from under the bar. Your captain's been busy. Multiple offshore accounts, regular transfers coinciding with major drug busts. Pattern goes back 18 months. Show me. Joey spread out various documents, bank statements, surveillance photos, transaction records. Powers has been skimming from seized assets, used his position to coordinate with evidence control. Smart setup. Almost impossible to trace unless you know where to look. Nick's eyes scanned the documents methodically. And Zach, your partner, Joey pulled out another set of papers. Promoted to detective sergeant last month. Position that was supposed to be yours. Found something interesting, though. He's been making regular deposits to a safety deposit box at First National. Way more than a detective's salary should allow. Nick's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened slightly on the glass. Access codes to the tower. Wasn't easy, Joey said, sliding over a USB drive. But money talks. Got everything. Security rotations, camera blind spots, emergency protocols. Building manager has a gambling problem. Wasn't hard to convince him to help. Nick pocketed the drive. What about their meetings? Your wife and Powers meet twice a week at the tower. Zach and her. They use various hotels. Powers keeps it covered using departmental resources. Joey hesitated. Nick, man, what are you planning? Nick's eyes met Joey's, cold and determined. Better you don't know the details. But I need one more thing. Access to Lowe's communication channels. Joey's face paled slightly. That's dangerous territory, brother. Lowe's paranoid about security. Can you do it? Yeah. But Nick, mixing Lowe into this. That's playing with fire. Nick stood, placing several $100 bills on the bar. Fire's already burning, Joey. I'm just directing the flames. As Nick turned to leave, Joey called out. Detective Key came asking questions about Powers yesterday. Nick paused. What kind? Financial irregularities. Missing evidence. Think he's building a case. Good. Keep me updated on any movement from Powers or Zach. After Nick left, Joey stared at the door for a long moment before picking up his phone. Yeah, it's me. You were right. He's going after all of them. No, this isn't just about revenge. He's dismantling everything in his car. Nick reviewed the documents. Each page revealed new layers of corruption. Powers hadn't just been taking bribes. He built an entire shadow operation within the department. The promotion Zach received had been part of a larger pattern of strategic placements. His phone buzzed. A message from Tanya. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Nick's response was immediate. Be safe. Love you. The lies flowed easily now. Part of his larger strategy. He pulled out the burner phone, sending a message to an unlisted number. Need information on Lowe's next shipment. Usual price. Detective Stanley Key's response came quickly. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's worth the cost. Nick smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The cost was already calculated in betrayal and blood and broken trust. Every piece was falling into place. He started the car, mind working through the next phases of his plan. Powers' corruption would be his weakness. Zach's greed would be his downfall. And Tanya, her betrayal would orchestrate their destruction. His phone buzzed again, this time from Powers. Team meeting tomorrow. New intel on Lowe. Copy that, Captain. Nick replied, professional as ever. He drove to the station, maintaining his normal routine. Everything had to appear business as usual while he set his pieces in motion. The old Nick Hester, the one who believed in the system, was gone. In his place sat a man who understood that true justice required a personal touch. Later that night, he sat in his home office, systematically going through the information Joy had provided. Each document, each photo, each transaction log was a weapon to be used precisely. The operation against Lowe would proceed as planned. But now it would serve a greater purpose. Detective Key was right. Everything had a cost. Soon, they would all learn exactly how high that cost could be. Over the next few weeks, Nick executed his plan with surgical precision. Each move was calculated. Each piece of information strategically placed for maximum impact. Captain, Nick approached Powers' office one morning, holding a file. Found something interesting in the Lowe surveillance. Powers looked up from his desk. The picture of professional authority. What VE you got? Nick placed several surveillance photos on the desk, carefully selected from Joey's intelligence. These show regular meetings between Lowe's lieutenant and someone from law enforcement. Couldn't get a clear ID, but Powers studied the photos, his expression carefully neutral. Good work, Hester. I'll look into it. Nick noticed the slight tension in Powers' shoulders. The captain had recognized Zach in the photos. The seed was planted. Later that day, Nick made his way to Lowe's territory, using one of his old undercover identities. The bar was dingy, perfect for the kind of conversation he needed to have. Mr. Lowe doesn't take meetings without proper introduction, the bartender said. Nick slid over an envelope. Tell him it's about Captain Powers and a potential leak in his organization. 20 minutes later, he sat across from Armando Lowe in a back room. The crime boss was younger than most expected, his expensive suit at odds with the surroundings. You're taking a big risk coming here, Lowe said, studying Nick carefully. I'm taking a bigger risk keeping quiet. Nick pushed forward another envelope. Powers is planning to move on your next shipment. He's got someone inside your organization feeding him information. Lowe's eyes narrowed. And why should I believe you? Because Powers screwed me out of a promotion, gave it to his pet detective instead. Nick's voice carried just the right amount of bitterness. I've got proof of his whole operation. How he schemes from busts. How he's been playing both sides. Lowe opened the envelope, examining the doctored evidence Nick had prepared. This is very detailed. I'm thorough. Nick leaned forward. Powers thinks he's untouchable. But everyone has a weakness. The meeting lasted another hour. By the time Nick left, the trap was set. Lowe would investigate the information, find the breadcrumbs leading to Zach, and discover Powers' apparent betrayal. Back at the precinct, Nick maintained his normal routine. He watched as Powers called Zach into his office, their discussion becoming heated behind closed doors. Everything okay, partner? Nick asked when Zach emerged, looking shaken. Yeah. Just departmental politics. Zach's forced to smile. Hey, need to cancel drinks tonight. Something came up. Nick nodded sympathetically. No problem. Another time. His phone buzzed. A message from Joey. Lowe's people are moving. They'd been asking questions about Powers and your partner. Perfect. The pressure was building. That evening, Nick reviewed his surveillance footage of Powers' recent meetings. The captain was growing paranoid, checking for tails, varying his routes. The corruption evidence Nick had leaked to Internal Affairs was having its effect. Tanya's text messages to both Powers and Zach had become increasingly frantic. Nick monitored their communication through the backdoor Joy had provided in their phones. We need to talk. Tanya wrote to Powers. Things are getting complicated. Not now, Powers replied. Something's wrong. Being watched. To Zach. Powers is acting strange. What's going on? Stay away from the tower for now, Zach responded. Not safe. Nick allowed himself a small smile. The fear was spreading. The uncertainty growing. Each player was reacting exactly as predicted. Detective Key approached Nick's desk the next day. Interesting reports coming across my desk. Hester. Powers is getting sloppy. Is he? Nick kept his tone neutral. Missing evidence. Inconsistent reports. Someone's applying pressure. Key studied Nick carefully. Just make sure whatever happens, it's clean. Nick nodded once, understanding the message. Key was offering tacit support as long as nothing could be traced back to the department. The operation against Lowe continued officially, but now every piece of intelligence was carefully manipulated. Nick fed information to both sides, telling Powers about Lowe's shipments while ensuring Lowe knew about the police surveillance. Each player's moves became more desperate. Powers increased security around the tower. Lowe's men were spotted near police hangouts. Zach started missing shifts, his nerves showing. Through it all, Nick maintained his professional facade. Every morning, he kissed Tanya goodbye. Every day, he played the dedicated detective. Every night, he monitored their growing panic. His phone buzzed with another message from Joey. Lowe's planning something big. His people are arming up. Good, Nick replied. Keep me posted. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. Now all that remained was to watch it spring. The night of the massive drug shipment arrived with an electric tension in the air. Nick had ensured all players would be present, each driven by their own desperate motivations. Alpha team in position. Nick reported through his radio, stationed in his usual surveillance spot, overlooking the Obsidian Tower. Copy that. Powers' voice came through. Tense with barely contained Beta team status silence from Zach's position. Beta team report, Powers demanded. Nick watched through his scope as Lowe's convoy approached the tower. Everything was proceeding according to plan. His burner phone vibrated. A message from his source inside Lowe's organization. Boss expects to catch a rat tonight. Armed and ready. All units maintain position, Powers ordered. This is our chance to take down Lowe's entire operation. Nick's regular phone lit up with a message from Tanya. Meeting D tonight. Don't wait up. His reply was brief. Stay safe. Through his scope, Nick observed the pieces moving into position. Lowe's men took their positions around the tower, more than usual for a normal shipment. Powers had positioned his team strategically, but they were walking into an ambush. Movement in the parking structure. A voice reported over the radio. Hold positions. Powers commanded. Wait for my signal. Nick watched as Zach's car pulled into the underground parking. Right on schedule. His partner was coming to warn Powers about Lowe's trap. Unaware that he was playing his part perfectly. The next hour was a symphony of carefully orchestrated chaos. Lowe's men, believing they were about to catch a police informant. Powers, thinking he was about to make the bust of his career. Zach, rushing to prevent a disaster he had helped create. And Tanya, meeting Powers in his penthouse office. Unaware she was about to become collateral damage. The first shots came from Lowe's men. Spotting what they thought was a police sniper, the response from Powers' teams was immediate. Shots fired. Shots fired. Voices screamed over the radio. All units move in. Powers ordered. Nick maintained his position, watching through his scope as the scene exploded into violence. Lowe's men engaged with police teams. Zach, caught in the middle, tried to make his way to the penthouse. Through the thermal imaging, Nick observed the drama unfolding in Powers' office. The captain, realizing the trap too late. Tanya, caught in a nightmare of her own making. The door bursting open as Lowe's men stormed in. The gunfire was deafening, even from Nick's position. He watched his bodies fall. As blood painted the pristine offices of the Obsidian Tower, his scope caught Tanya's final moments, her last word forming on her lips as she reached toward the window. Nick, not Powers, not Zach, his name. When it was over, the penthouse was silent. Lowe and several of his men lay dead. Powers was wounded but alive. Zach had vanished in the chaos. Nick maintained his position until the all-clear was given. His face revealed nothing as he packed up his equipment. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Joey. It's done. All of it. Just like you planned. He deleted the message, along with every other piece of evidence linking him to the night's events. The investigation would show exactly what he wanted it to show. A drug bust gone wrong, complicated by departmental corruption. As he drove away from the scene, Nick allowed himself a small smile. They had all played their parts perfectly, never realizing they were actors in his carefully crafted production. The betrayers had betrayed each other, their own paranoia, and guilt becoming weapons in his arsenal. Tomorrow, he would play the grieving husband, the dedicated detective. But tonight, he savored the knowledge that justice, his kind of justice, had been served. Detective Bernice Houston surveyed the carnage in the Obsidian Tower's penthouse, her experienced eyes taking in every detail. For bodies lay where they had fallen, blood staining the expensive decor. The forensics team worked methodically, photographing and cataloging evidence. "Detective," one of the techs called out, "you need to see this." Houston moved to where the tech crouched beside one of the bodies. "What VE you got?" "Ballistics don't match the reported firefight pattern. These shots," the tech pointed to specific entry wounds, "they're too precise. Professional." Houston's eyes narrowed. Something about this scene felt staged, but she couldn't put her finger on why. Her attention turned to Nicholas Hester, who stood at the entrance speaking with other officers. His wife's body had already been removed, yet his composure remained unnaturally steady. "Detective Hester," she called out a moment. Nick approached his face, a perfect mask of controlled grief. "What can I do for you?" "Detective Houston, walk me through the sequence of events again." "Not much to tell. Standard surveillance operation. Lowe arrived for the shipment. Something spooked his security team. Firefight broke out." His voice caught slightly at the next part. "Tanya, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Houston studied his face, and Captain Powers took a round to the shoulder. "He's at Boston General." 3 days into the investigation, another body surfaced in the Charles River. Then another and another, each one connected to Lowe's organization. Each death appearing like cleanup rather than coincidence. "Something's not adding up." Houston muttered, reviewing the case files in her office. The evidence painted a picture of a drug bust gone wrong, but the precision of it all suggested otherwise. She visited Powers in the hospital, finding the captain propped up in bed, his shoulder heavily bandaged. "Detective Houston." Powers greeted her, his voice weak. "Come to take another statement. Just filling in some gaps." She pulled out her notebook. "Your presence in the penthouse that night. It wasn't logged in the operation plan." Powers' eyes darted away momentarily. Last-minute decision. Wanted eyes on the situation. With Mrs. Hester, the captain's heart monitor beeped faster. "I don't know what you're implying." "Detective, 3 more bodies have turned up in the river. All those men. Someone's tying up loose ends. It's a dangerous business." Powers replied. "People disappear." Houston left the hospital room unconvinced. Her next stop was the station, where Nick sat at his desk, working through reports. "Quite a commendation you've got coming," she said, leaning against his desk. "Undercover work that led to Lowe's operation being shut down. Just doing my job." Nick didn't look up from his paperwork. "Your partner, Espinosa. Any idea where he might have gone?" Now Nick did look up, his eyes meeting hers directly. Zach disappeared in the chaos. His car was found near the river. Empty, except for his phone. "Last message sent to your wife. Everything's falling apart." Houston watched for any reaction. Interesting choice of last words. Zach was always dramatic. Nick replied, his tone neutral. Back in her office, Houston spread out the evidence. Surveillance photos, ballistics reports, witness statements, all pointing to a drug bust gone wrong. Yet something felt orchestrated about the whole thing. Her phone rang. The forensic lab. "Detective, we found something in the ballistics analysis. Some of the shots, they couldn't have come from where witnesses reported the shooters were positioned." Houston's suspicions deepened. She spent the next week building a timeline, tracking movements, connecting dots. The picture that emerged suggested something far more calculated than a botched operation. She brought her concerns to her superior. "Sir, I believe the Obsidian Tower incident was staged." "By whom?" "Detective. Not sure yet. But someone manipulated both sides. Lowe's men thought they were ambushing an informant. Powers thought he was making a major bust. Everyone played their part perfectly." "You have proof?" Houston hesitated. "Nothing concrete, just patterns." "Then stick to what we can prove. 4 bodies in the penthouse, 3 in the river. A drug bust that went sideways. Departmental corruption that's being handled internally. She understood the message. Some cases were better left closed, especially when they involved dirty cops and dead crime bosses. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Nicholas Hester knew more than he was saying. The way he carried himself, the precision of his reports, the perfect timing of his presence that night. It all spoke of someone who had orchestrated rather than reacted. But the evidence told the story they needed to tell. And in the end, that's what would go in her report. Sometimes, justice wore a different face than the law. Powers sat in the internal affairs interview room, his injured shoulder making him shift uncomfortably in his chair. The painkillers had worn off, but the pain helped keep his mind sharp. "Let's go through it again, Captain." The IA investigator said, "Your presence in the penthouse that night." Powers' nerves were fraying. 3 hours of questions, each one peeling back layers he'd rather keep hidden. Like I said, it was an operational decision. With Mrs. Hester present, something in the investigator's tone made Powers' skin crawl. He'd been in law enforcement long enough to recognize when the walls were closing in. "I want to revise my statement," he said suddenly. The investigator leaned forward. "Go on." The Obsidian Tower operation, it wasn't what it seemed. Hester, he planned everything. Set us all up. That's a serious accusation, Captain. Evidence. Powers laughed bitterly. Evidence. He made sure there wouldn't be any. But think about it. Who had access to both sides? Who knew everyone's movements? Who benefited from it all going wrong? You're suggesting Detective Hester orchestrated a massacre that killed his own wife. You don't understand. Powers insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. He knew about the affairs. Must have known for weeks. The information leaks, the growing tension between Lowe's crew and our department. It was all him. The investigator made notes. These affairs you mentioned. Powers realized too late the trap he'd walked into. Each word now dug his grave deeper. Captain Powers. Detective Key's voice came from the doorway. The veteran investigator entered slowly, his presence commanding immediate attention. That's quite a story you're telling. He, Powers acknowledged, his voice tight. Come to hear my confession. Actually, I'm here about some interesting financial records that cross my desk. Offshore accounts, missing evidence, irregular promotions. Care to explain? Powers' face drained of color. Those records were encrypted. Secure. Nothing's secure forever, Captain. Especially not from someone with the right motivation and resources. The implication hung heavy in the air. Powers' mind raced, connecting dots he should have seen weeks ago. Hester, he had access. When he was working the Lowe case, a dedicated detective, he remarked, building a case against corruption in the department. Imagine the commendation he'll receive. Powers lunged forward, forgetting his injured shoulder. Don't you see? He played us all. The evidence you have, he planted it. The whole operation was his design. Careful, Captain. Key's voice carried a warning. Wild accusations without proof can damage a man's credibility, especially when he's already under investigation for corruption. Powers slumped back, defeated. The pieces had finally fallen into place. But it was too late. Everything, the evidence against him, the missing money, even Zach's disappearance, it all served to tell a story. A story where he was the villain, and Hester was the dedicated detective who exposed departmental corruption. He won. Powers whispered. Didn't he? He smiled. But his eyes remained cold. The report will show what it shows, Captain. A dirty cop, a dangerous criminal, and unfortunate collateral damage. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. After Powers' interview, Key found Nick in the station parking lot. Quite a performance in there, Nick said without turning around. Powers broke exactly as expected. Started throwing accusations, making himself look desperate and unstable. And the evidence? Rock solid. Every transaction, every missing piece of evidence, every abuse of power, documented and verified. No one will question it. Nick nodded once. Some forms of justice don't come from a courtroom. No, Key agreed. They don't. He studied the younger detective carefully. The report will show Powers was dirty, Lowe was dangerous, and everything else was just unfortunate crossfire. Nick understood the message. The official narrative was set. Any other version of events would die with Powers' credibility. 6 months passed, each day adding another layer to the official story of the Obsidian Tower massacre. Nick stood at Tanya's grave, his face impassive as he placed fresh flowers. The headstone was simple, elegant, just like the lie it represented. Powers had resigned in disgrace, facing federal corruption charges that would keep him occupied for years. Lowe's organization had crumbled, its remnants scattered to the winds. And Zach, well, rumors placed him in Mexico, but dead men didn't need passports. Detective Houston had closed the case, her report a masterpiece of careful omission. The official verdict satisfied everyone. A drug bust gone wrong, complicated by departmental corruption, clean, simple, believable. Nick's commendation hung in his office, a testament to his extraordinary undercover work that exposed corruption within the department. His colleagues looked at him with a mixture of respect and unease. The dedicated detective who had lost everything but kept serving. That evening, he visited Joey's bar. The place was empty, as it always was when they needed to talk. Was it worth it? Joey asked, placing a glass in front of him. Nick considered the question, remembering each step of his calculated revenge. The way he had manipulated Powers' paranoia, fed Lowe's suspicions, exploited Zach's weaknesses. The precise orchestration of that final night, where bullets found their marks exactly as planned. He thought about Tanya's betrayal, how she had played the loving wife while secretly meeting both Powers and Zach. The look of recognition in her eyes that final moment, when she realized who had truly orchestrated her downfall. Powers' desperate accusations and custody, the evidence trail that led exactly where Nick had designed it to lead. The way he had played his part in cementing the official narrative. All pieces of a puzzle only he could see in its entirety. Justice comes in many forms, Nick replied, leaving cash on the bar. Some debts could only be paid in full, and he had collected with interest. Joey watched him leave, understanding that the man who walked out wasn't the same one he'd known in Jersey. That man had believed in the system, and right and wrong. This one had transcended such simple distinctions. Nick walked into the Boston night, his steps purposeful. Somewhere in the dark waters of the Charles River, certain secrets would stay buried forever. Zach's body, the real evidence, the truth about that night, all consumed by the deep waters of justice served cold. The system might be corrupt, but karma always finds its mark. And Nicholas Hester had become its perfect instrument, dealing retribution with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of an executioner. Let them have their official story. Let them believe in their neat explanations and clean conclusions. He knew the truth, that vengeance, properly planned and patiently executed, was its own form of justice. The commendation on his wall served as a daily reminder. Sometimes the most complete revenge was the one that left you decorated as a hero, while your enemies lay scattered and broken, their reputations destroyed, their lives ended or ruined by their own apparent actions. He smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. The game was over, the players disposed of, and he had emerged not just victorious, but untouchable. After all, who would suspect the grieving widow, the dedicated detective, the man who had seemingly lost everything? The perfect revenge wasn't just about killing your enemies. It was about destroying them so completely that even their memories served your purpose, and Nicholas Hester had achieved exactly that. Epilogue. 5 years later, Nicholas Hester sat across from Commissioner Williams in the oak-paneled office of Boston Police Department headquarters. The promotion board's decision lay in a folder between them. "Congratulations, Deputy Superintendent Hester," Williams said, sliding the folder forward. "Internal Affairs Division needs a strong leader. Your record speaks for itself." Nick accepted the folder with a modest nod. 5 years had added streaks of gray to his temples, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating the same eyes that had watched an empire of corruption crumble through the scope of his rifle. Detective Key recommended you personally before his retirement. Williams continued, said you understand how justice really works in this city. Key was a good mentor, Nick replied, his voice carrying the same professional detachment it had developed since the Obsidian Tower incident. The promotion was the latest step in a career that had flourished from the ashes of tragedy. The department still whispered about him, the dedicated detective who had lost everything but kept serving. The man who had exposed corruption while suffering unimaginable personal loss. After the meeting, Nick drove to the cemetery. He maintained this monthly ritual not out of grief or remembrance, but as a reminder of debts paid. Tanya's grave remained well maintained, her headstone a monument to carefully crafted lies. His foam bust, a message from Joey, got some interesting news about our old friend up north. Dwayne Powers had served 3 years in federal prison before being released on good behavior. The former captain had emerged a broken man, his testimony against corrupt officers, buying him a reduced sentence. Now he worked as a night security guard at a mall in New Hampshire, jumping at shadows and drinking away his nightmares. Nick's investigation had uncovered every detail of Powers' corruption. The evidence trail had been perfect: offshore accounts, missing evidence, years of abusing his position. The captain's desperate accusations about Nick orchestrating everything had only made him appear more unstable. Joey's bar had become a legitimate business, its basement still occasionally hosting conversations that never saw official records. The former CI had prospered in the wake of Lowe's organization collapsing, becoming a valuable source of information for select members of law enforcement. 5th body this month in the river, Joey's message continued. Reminds me of old times. Nick smiled faintly. The Charles River had become notorious for revealing secrets, though never the ones he had buried there. Zachary Espinosa's disappearance remained officially unsolved. The rumors about Mexico had persisted until they faded into urban legend. Detective Bernice Houston had transferred to Chicago 2 years after closing the Obsidian Tower case. Her exceptional work had earned her a promotion, though colleagues noted she never seemed fully satisfied with the official narrative. She still sent Christmas cards to the department, her messages carrying subtle hints of unanswered questions. Nick's phone lit up with another message, this time from his current partner. Another internal affairs case, looks like corruption in the evidence room. I'll handle it, he replied. His new position gave him unprecedented access to departmental secrets. Every investigation, every piece of evidence, every internal communication passed through his office. He had become the system's perfect instrument, a man who understood that true justice sometimes required working in the shadows. The Obsidian Tower had been renovated and rebranded, its dark history buried under fresh paint and new management. Lowe's criminal empire had fragmented, its territories divided among smaller players who understood the importance of maintaining certain arrangements with law enforcement. Nick's home office wall displayed his commendations, each one a testament to his reputation for integrity and dedication. Below them sat a small safe containing evidence that would never see official files. Photographs, recordings, documents that told the real story of that night. His phone buzzed again, a detective applicant requesting a recommendation letter. Nick reviewed the file. The candidate was promising, reminiscent of himself from younger days, before he understood how justice really worked. At home, Nick maintained his solitary lifestyle. Colleagues had tried setting him up on dates, playing on his image as the tragic widower, but he deflected their attempts with practiced ease. His work provided all the satisfaction he needed. The investigation into the evidence room corruption would take months. Nick would follow every lead, document every transgression, build an airtight case, and if certain evidence disappeared, if certain suspects met unfortunate accidents, if the river claimed more secrets, well, that was just how justice worked in Boston. He logged into a secure server, reviewing reports from his network of informants. Powers had been asking questions again, his alcohol-fueled paranoia driving him to seek answers he would never find. Nick made a note to have him watch more closely. A news alert caught his attention. Another body had surfaced in the Charles River. The victim had connections to Lowe's old organization. Nick closed the alert without concern. Some loose ends tied themselves. Detective Key enjoyed his retirement in Florida, occasionally consulting on difficult cases. His last email to Nick had been typical of their correspondence. "Remember what I taught you. The report shows what it needs to show." The Sun said over Boston as Nick reviewed files for upcoming investigations. His position allowed him to shape how justice was served, to decide which sins were punished and which were leverage. The system that had failed him now served his purpose. Tomorrow he would visit Tanya's grave again, maintaining his image as the grieving husband who had channeled his loss into serving justice. The perfect cover for a man who had orchestrated the most complete revenge. One that left him not just successful, but untouchable. His phone lit up one final time. A message from an unlisted number. "Happy anniversary, Detective Superintendent. The river's waters run deep." Nick deleted the message without reply. 5 years had taught him that the best revenge wasn't just about destroying your enemies. It was about building something from their destruction, creating a position of power that ensured no one would ever betray you again. The night stretched ahead, full of possibilities. In his office, surrounded by commendations and carefully hidden evidence, Nicholas Hester allowed himself a small smile. Some debts were paid in full, but the interest compounded forever. The perfect revenge wasn't a moment of violence or a single act of retribution. It was a carefully constructed second life, built on the foundations of justice and fueled by the power to decide who received mercy and who faced judgment. In the end, Nicholas Hester had achieved more than revenge. He had become the architect of justice itself, determining which sins were punished and which secrets stayed buried in the dark waters of the Charles River, where even karma bowed to his will.